All right, welcome everyone to Digital E-commerce Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth. I'm absolutely thrilled today to have you guys join us. If you're passionate about e-commerce, digital marketing, or just want to stay ahead of the curve on online business world, then you're in the right place. I'm incredibly excited for today's episode because we have an exceptional guest with us today. Joining us is Phil. All right, Phil is actually an entrepreneur who helped different businesses to leverage podcasting to create a sustainable income, right? And Phil, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent, Kenneth. I'm so happy to be here. I'm ready to share everything I can for entrepreneurs in the digital e-commerce space to learn about podcasting and answer any questions they have.
Amazing. As you guys know, our podcast journey is we are on the 10th episode right now. So I might be able to learn something from Phil as well, for sure, right? So let's dig in, let's see how e-commerce and podcasting can be integrated together as a whole to mix into our content marketing game, right? So Phil, would you mind to give us an introduction about your process or your company, please?
Sure thing, Kenneth. And I want to thank you again for having me here and everyone who's listening. So a little bit about me and what I do. I run two different agencies. I have the Podcast Launch Agency, which is an agency that we concentrate on helping entrepreneurs, business owners, anybody really experts launch their podcasts in a seemingly simple, effective way that they can continue on. Because as Kenneth has probably already understood, podcasting isn't just us talking. It's everything else that there is. There's the pre and the post-production, which take up a lot of time. So our agency, my agency actually, with my co-founder, Chris, has found a way to make it streamlined so it's simpler for people to do. Not easier, but simpler, and takes everything out. And the other agency I have is the Podcast Mogul, which helps people become moguls in the podcasting world by monetizing or growing their podcast until it's large enough that people know who they are. But when it comes to e-commerce, you guys are so lucky, because you can have your podcast like Kenneth here has, and you can talk to people. It can be strictly on e-commerce, or it can be on any topic you want. One of the benefits of having an e-commerce business is it can sponsor your podcast. And already your podcast is monetized because you're paying $5-10 from your business to pay for ads on a podcast that you control and that you guys can talk about nearly anything. So let's say you have a let's say you have a business that sells cups, mugs. That's the only thing that you're selling. You're selling unique mugs, and it's called Mugs or Us. And you can have a podcast that talks to people about funny things. And this podcast is sponsored by Mugs or Us. Go to mugsorus.com to get an official mug. And then you guys can talk about comic books. You can talk about, digital marketing if you want. You can talk about mugs as a business. You can talk about nearly anything. And you have your podcast promoting that business that you have. Or you can contact other podcasters and say, hey, I want to sponsor you.
Right. Yeah, amazing. I like it. I think podcast is suitable for any niche because they are just so versatile. You can talk about anything.
Yep. There are close to 4 million podcasts on Apple as of, I think, the beginning of this year, I'll say. But in actuality, one of my friends, Alex Sanfilipino, who is an amazing guy in the podcasting world. He runs Podmatch, a great place if you want to become a guest on podcast to go to. He has worked with Apple and found that there's probably under 500,000 podcasts that are actively active, which means that they release an episode once a month minimum. So if you look at it, there's 3.5 million podcasts that aren't active for you. And that means you have all the chance in the world to start a podcast. Like, it is the perfect time to start a podcast.
Right. Okay. Before we dive into how to get traction, how about how should a e-commerce owner to validate whether or not the business is actually suitable for a podcast? Like, if we're on Shopify, we got toys niche. I can imagine baby niche about parenting is always the best to go for. But then, in ideal, do we have a step-by-step process to understand whether or not like we are good for a podcast, or should we reinvest our marketing budget into, say, YouTube Shorts, or maybe into, let's say, creating a quiz funnel, then choosing podcasts?
Depending on the niche, obviously, if you have something that's super, super niched that doesn't lend itself to conversations, we'll say, then you're maybe best to be a guest on podcasts and talk about your journey as an entrepreneur, or in the e-commerce space, depending on what you are, is Shopify, niched and all that. There's also the option of creating your own podcast and just using your company to sponsor it. At that point, you can make your podcast about anything, and you just have the company sponsor it. So if you still want to do a podcast, there's that option. But if you're going really, if you're already super, super niched, I would suggest guesting on podcasts to talk about your journey, as that will help you more because you have to do less work. But if you're dead set on starting a podcast, my first suggestion is you sit down and you look at who is it that you want to talk to. Obviously, you want to talk to people who are going to be buying your products, if that's the main purpose of the podcast. But at the same time, you want to be very clear on who your podcast is for. You don't want to say it's for everybody, because when you say it's for everybody, no one's going to listen to it. And what I usually tell when say to clients who come, oh yeah, I want everybody to listen to my podcast. I go, okay, you have an ant problem. You go to the store. You have kills all bugs, kills all cockroaches, or kills all ants. What are you buying? You're going to buy, if you have an ant problem, you're going to buy the kill all ants.
Yeah, that's great.
It's exactly like a podcast. Your podcast can be for everybody, and that's great. However, not everybody's going to want to listen to a podcast that's for everybody. They want one podcast that's just directly to them. So you want to drill down to creating an avatar of your listener. Give them a name, give them a date of birth, like go hardcore, like you're creating an individual that eventually will hear your podcast and come up to you one day and go, oh my God, I listened to your podcast. And you're like, holy shit, you're my avatar. You're the person I made the podcast for. And that is the big crux of it. Once you know that will answer every single question, because now you're in the mindset of your listener. Like for my main podcast, Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur podcast, the ideal listener was me when I was 26. When I was 26, I wanted to start a business online. I had no idea how to start a business online. Like no one had any books out. There was no John Lee Dumas. There was no Alex Hermosi. There was no what's his name? Pat Flynn, sorry. There was none of these people around when I was 24, 26. So I had no idea about all the crazy stuff that you could do online. So I now interview people who make a living online. And I've learned so much from them. And also my, not to brag, but my network of people is worth over $1 billion, just from the people I've interviewed and had on my podcast, just from the amazing stuff that they've done in their business. And because of that, I've always wanted to see all jobs when I was younger, like what jobs are out there. And this gives me the opportunity to talk to people online about all the different ways they can make money online, from agency owners to freelancers to podcast moguls like myself. But once you've identified who your podcast is for, it's very easy then to create your podcast, and then market your podcast is even easier, because then you can just find out where people like, where was I hanging out when I was 26? Oh, I was over here. So I start going over there, and you start talking to people, building that rapport, and you say, oh yeah, I have a podcast that talks to people.
Yeah. The more you build rapport, the more you understand, I mean, as well as networking, of course, the more you understand like the hidden customer problem that they have, and then you might be able to build a different solution for them. So as an e-commerce podcaster, do you think there is an ideal audience we should be interviewing? Should we interview our customers, or should we just limit into interviewing our, let's say, industry expert on, let's say, supplement niche, or maybe essential oil niche? Or do you think it's always like versatile rather than just expert and customer? You can bring in anyone.
If you're starting your e-commerce journey, we've got the perfect service for you. We specialize in product research to help you find the right winning products for your store. And if you're interested in dropshipping, we offer an all-in-one service for under $30. From website creation to importing products, we get your store up and running in no time. Interested? Visit our website or click the link in the description box to get started. Let's make your e-commerce dreams a reality.
Yeah, you have the option of bringing in anyone. I advise sometimes against that. If you have, like, your podcast is digital e-commerce, so you're very lucky because you can bring on people who support e-commerce specifically. So people like myself, podcasters that can help e-commerce get larger or can help them with their marketing. You can bring on specific people who create e-commerce stores, if you will, like Shopify and Printify and all those fun stuff. Or you can focus on specifically the people that, or you can just talk about your business, right? You have those kind of three options. You're talking just simply about yourself, like Kenneth comes on, talks about his stuff, and that's it. Or you can come on and interview people who have similar stores to you, and you can share knowledge about how they go about doing business. Or you have experts who are on the periphery of e-commerce that help e-commerce businesses. It's really what you want to add to your customer, like who your listener, what do you want to give them? Do you want to give them access to other people that can help their business? So if, let's say, we'll take your podcast, Kenneth, your ideal audience members are people who either have started an e-commerce brand or are looking to start one and they need help, right? So you are providing both of those people, both of those audience avatars with the opportunity to either hear from experts in the field who have built businesses in the e-commerce world, or people who are helping others build their business. So, like digital marketers, copywriters, podcasters, funnel builders, those type of people help e-commerce businesses grow. So you have those two, you can leverage that. But if you wanted to cement your authority as someone who is the king, we'll say, of digital e-commerce, then you would be doing solo episodes more often than guest episodes. So now you're presenting yourself as an expert, and then people can come to trust you. Now, if I'm an e-commerce store owner, I'm probably not going to do solo episodes because my goal is to sell more of my products on my store. So I'll probably have, if my store, I'll use an example. A buddy of mine has a podcast that is strictly for horror movies. He loves horror movies. He does nothing but horror movies, right? That's his podcast. He reviews horror movies from the big to the very unknown. Like he's like, I'm all over the place. I want his listener is a fan of horror. He has a merch shop, right? Now, most podcasters, they have a merch shop. It doesn't do that well. However, because his podcast, he can talk about his merch shop on his shop. So let's say you have a store that deals with Funko Pops, right? Now, making a podcast that is you talking about selling Funko Pops probably won't be the most entertaining podcast. It could be. There's an audience for everything. However, if you bring on people who, have collects Funko Pops, or they love pop culture, which Funko Pops are about, then you have the opportunity to build a knowledge base for yourself and your audience on pop culture, on horror, if you will. Now you have a merch store that you say, hey, we have a merch store. It's, punkopop.com or horrorwithsirsturdy.com, and people can purchase merch to help support you. Now, as you grow as a podcast, it's going to go bigger, and then you can, obviously you're focusing on other aspects of bringing in content, but you can use the content from your podcast to say, hey, on social media for the store, you can say, hey, check out this. Our owner and Bill were talking about product that we sell, and you can put that on. You have that clip. But podcast has so much potential for creating content for you. You have the video just right here, this video, great content because you can put it up on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok, but then also there's the written content that can come from it that you can then put onto LinkedIn, Facebook, Medium, blog posts. Like, you have all these opportunities from podcasts to create as much content as you can. Now, it's not going to be as beautiful as the Mr. Beast video, because Mr. Beast pays billions of dollars into his thing, but you have the opportunity for the audience to learn. And if you're putting that into place, that's going to bring up your authority and expertise in the given domain, given niche that your podcast is on.
Yeah, agree. I think this is a very good way to build a community out of, like, the lowest hanging fruit of a way to try to educate your audience, associate yourself with certain expertise that is complementary to your product itself. And what you just mentioned, that you can chop down a long form video into a short form, into multiple short form videos, put it in TikTok, Instagram. I mean, those is actually a very easy content that you can produce, right? Because imagine producing a content, like shoot a videos, or maybe try to come up with a product shoot that describe about the feature itself, right? You probably have to constantly do that, right? You can do once, but then if you don't have like another content behind, like blog, podcast, then you probably have to like keep investing in product shoot, right? So each product shoot gonna cost you around 1,000, 2,000. Then imagine, like, each of a month, if you're paying for that, then it's gonna be expensive. So you gotta find content from somewhere, right? So what Phil just mentioned, using podcasts to associate into your content, to integrate into your content game, and then send out email blasts, send out into the Instagram reel. Those are actually a very efficient way and cost-effective way to run your content marketing for your e-commerce, right? So Phil, what do you think that we should do to get started in podcast? But or what's the first step that our audience should know?
Great question. The first thing you need to do when you're starting a podcast is understand that this moment that me and Kenneth are having, this is like 20% of your podcast. It is only 20% of your podcast. So you have to understand that podcasting is a lot of work. But the initial start is a lot of work. But once it starts rolling and you have procedures in place and sequences and all that fun stuff that a business owner has, it becomes way simpler in life. And then it's just like, okay, I just have to talk. So you have to decide. The first thing you need to decide is it going to be solo where I'm just talking to the camera, or is it going to be a guest-based podcast, round table, interview-based? You have to make the decision on what your podcast is going to be. Once you have that, then all you have to do is write out the ideal sequence of your podcast, which is intro, music, like you saw here with Kenneth's little thank you for tuning in, with the music, which is always important. Then there's your intro when Kenneth introduced me, and then the episode starts, right? And then how does it end? Do we have a sequence where the host has a certain outro to read, or do we just leave it go to the outro? How do we end the guest? Once you have the kind of the concept of your podcast and you know who you're talking to, then the job is just to start. Just start recording. I always suggest people have, before they launch, a minimum of 5 episodes recorded and edited. The reason being is when you launch, if you just launch with 1 episode, people are going to be like, oh, okay, this is nice, and never come back to it. But if you give them at least 2 to 3 episodes when you launch, now you have the opportunity for them to get engaged with you. And you're like, oh, Kenneth has has this trailer, then he has 3 episodes. I listened to the 3 episodes. My God, they're great. He's amazing. I can't wait for the next episode to come out. And then the next week you release, or a couple days later, depending on your release schedule, you release another episode, and they're there. Now you have this, you're building up. So when people come to listen, they don't only have like 4 episodes after a month. They have like 6 episodes. And they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Kenneth knows so much, or he has access to so many guests. And people will be enjoying that. And then you'll slowly grow, and you'll see increase if you do it properly. Like you say, hey, make sure you check out mugsrus.com for the best mugs in and around town. Now to your episode, you have that. People are going to hear that, and they're going to start associating mugs. And then in the episode, you can always make sure you show a mug, or whatever the product is, like you make it like a TV show, radio show, so that people have a better understanding of what's going on. Because really, in reality, the audio version of this is the new radio. We have streaming radio now. Podcasts are just streaming radio because radio stations are putting their stuff on podcasts and podcasts are going on radio. So we're the exact same. And video, this video version, people go on YouTube. YouTube is the new TV. If you think about it, it is like if you have YouTube, you have over 1 billion channels. When in your life did you have access to 1 billion channels, right? And you have thousands upon thousands of episodes to watch, right? And you can binge forever. Like you have, yes, it doesn't necessarily like a TV show, but there's, car shows, there's digital entrepreneur shows. There's you have so many different channels to choose from, not just only from the streaming channels you have on YouTube. So by creating a video, you now have a TV show that can be either a talk show like late night, or it could be more Oprah based, or it could be single, just you talking to the audience. Like it's your own show. Like this is your podcast. This is your domain. You have the opportunity to create this media empire now to be a part of your e-commerce brand. And if you think about it, you can charge people to come onto your podcast if you want. But I'm going off here. Like the 2 things you need to know if you're going to start a podcast is 3 things. I'm going to give you 3 things. Who are you talking to? The style of your podcast, and you just do it. That's once you have the first 2, just start recording. Your first episode's always going to suck, but it's also going to be your best episode because it's the only episode you have. But as you start going along the lines, you'll start growing. You'll start learning more, and you'll start becoming a better podcaster. The ums and ahs, your pauses, are going to slowly disappear. And before you know, you're going to be eloquently speaking, and people are going to be like, this man has been doing it, or this lady or this person has been doing it for years. I've been doing it for over a decade, so this is why I seem so, prestige. I am not this clean. I am not this cut. I usually fumble over my words a lot more, but I'm in podcasting mode. So now I'm in this presenter. I'm in Phil Better instead of the Phil Lemieux who I normally act as.
Right. Practice makes perfect, right? How about tool-wise? Like with current AI trend right now, like you can use AI avatar, AI music, all the sort of things could be AI focused. Could you, this is just coming out of the blue, right? Could you use an AI avatar to talk to another AI avatar and then create a podcast?
So funny you ask. A podcast that I'm in the process of launching, the co-host of that, Mr. Coach Dan Gordon, he actually created a podcast episode where it's just him. It's just him talking technically to himself. But if you listen to the episode, it's another person. He's talking to another person, and I hate ruining it. But at the end of it, the person goes, Dan, you're only talking to yourself. And Dan's like, what? He goes, yeah, this is an AI voice changer that you're using from System 11. Now, System 11 allows you to put your voice, you can talk or you can write, and then an AI voice is created with it's perfect. Like you can't even tell. The intro to our podcast is an AI voice that he did. So you have AI voices that you could, if you don't want to have any guests and you just want to talk to yourself, create your own script and that, you can do that. There are AI tools like podcastle.ai that edit podcasts. Now, this is more for the simpler podcasts, not I have to be very touch and go. And if you need something more sophisticated, I suggest non-AI tools. But if you need something to quickly make the game all local and everything's perfect, Podcast AI, perfect tool. There's also Resound is a great tool, but there's a lot of AI tools. The ones that I use are podcastle.ai as well as Cast Magic. Cast Magic, it is a tool that I was lucky enough to grab off AppSumo before they came off, but they are an amazing tool that literally you just upload your audio, your video, and you can put it to your YouTube as well if you want, and it will transcribe it, and then it will create titles, it will create summaries of the episode, it will create questions. You can get it to create an article based on this episode. It's like uploading your pardon me, your audio to ChatGPT and having ChatGPT do it.
That's
But
great.
it's all in this one place. So you don't even have to worry about paying for ChatGPT. You have Cast Magic, it'll do it for you. And it is the best tool I have. Like, bar none, if I didn't have Cast Magic, I'd probably feel like I'm in the Stone Age.
Okay, good recommendation. One more question. Have you, I'm sure you stumble across like asynchronized podcasting. Like, I remember you mentioned AppSumo, right? There's a tool called Rumble Studio, right? And
Yes.
and then like the way that they do like podcasting, it doesn't require you to show up, just you speaking in a audio, and then other person will just come in and answering your question. Like, I'm sure that lacks a lot of element of like rapport or like connections, right? But what's your take about that?
I think it's good. It's if you have a very time-consuming people, like I interview entrepreneurs. Sometimes they're very, very busy, and they may not be able to make the episode. So having something like Rumble Studio, where the rapport isn't really there. Like, we're having a great rapport right now. We're laughing, we're joking back and forth. But if you have people who are very busy, who are shy, this gives them the ability to record their audio without having to worry about messing up. Because they can then stop and then re-record, stop and re-record their answers to your questions if they feel they've messed up. So there is a benefit to it. I personally prefer this nice little bantering. We can go back and forth because it provides a more human approach to it. However, I fully understand that some people are uber busy. They have certain things that stop them from being able to be connected and have this joy banter. So something like Rumble Studio that allows me to put a video up with asking questions and then someone can respond to those. It's perfect. It's another way of doing podcasting. I am not a purist in the sense of like, hey, this is how a podcast has to be. The only purist I am is if it doesn't have an RRS feed, it's not a podcast. That's simple. That's like how purist I am. Like, the bare minimum is you need to have an RSS feed. But after that, like, anything can be a podcast. I have zero issues with someone saying my YouTube channel is a podcast. Great. As long as you're happy, great. That's all I care about. It's getting more people knowing what podcasting is. So if they're like, oh, I only listen to podcasts on YouTube, great. I love you. You love podcasts. You love that. I only listen to it on Apple or Spotify or one of the other billions of pod catchers that there are. I love you. For me, as long as you say it's a podcast, I'm not going to argue with you because there's no point.
All right, that's good saying. What do you think people can learn from you if they come to you to start the podcast?
They'll learn the system that I've used for over a decade that allows me to launch a podcast and run a podcast by a solo person. So if you don't want to build a big team, you can come to the Podcast Launch Agency or the Podcast Mogul, and you can learn how to run your podcast by yourself, but also we'll give you the tools in case you hire people, right? We're not going to say, hey, you have to run it yourself. No, we're going to show you how you can run it yourself, or how you can get your employees to run it while you don't do anything. That's what we do. We love podcasting. Me and my partner have been podcasting since, I've been over a decade. He's been doing it since 2021, and he's had amazing success being able to talk with some experts from all over the world and build his network. He's actually used his podcast to land jobs. That's what he's done. He landed at AppSumo, he landed at CapShow, he landed at another company. He was actually poached to be a co-founder. Unfortunately, didn't work out, but he leveraged his podcast to become an employee of companies because they saw the value that he created with his podcast, the community he built with his podcast. So podcasting, again, it doesn't just have to be for you. It can be for your career. You can leverage the podcast for your career, and we'll help you out. We have such a great community that my partner has created, Chris has created, that everybody helps everybody. Like, if someone has a question, we'll be helping you out. Everybody helps out. Like, it is like a little community of friends and family helping each other out grow. So that's one of the things you get when you come in. You become part of our community and we all help. So it's like, hey, I'm looking for lead gen. Someone's like, oh, I have some friends here, boom, boom, boom. Or I have this problem with my podcast. We're all connected. So that's what you're getting. You're coming into a community that's built, that's loving and warm, and we want you to succeed more than we want us to succeed. I've met all my goals as a podcaster. Like, I've gotten over 100 million downloads. I've won an award. I've got clients for my podcast. For me, my podcasting journey, like hitting those, like, oh, I hit 1 million downloads, it doesn't yell anything to me because I've been in this game. I've gotten so much. My joy now comes from seeing other people launch their podcasts and hit those milestones. And that is just the best feeling when you see someone hit a milestone. Like, oh, I got my 50th episode, or I hit 500 downloads an episode. Like those, when someone hits that, someone who never had that before hits it, it's like, yeah, let's go. They just fall more and more in love with podcasting. So if I'm warning you, if you come into our community, you will fall in love with podcasting. That's our goal. We want you to fall in love with this art form and just have as much fun as possible.
That's amazing. Where can people find you?
If people want to find me, they can go, you can search the Podcast Mogul on the internet. I sound like I'm 90 years old. On the internet. But on Google, you can search it, the Podcast Mogul, you'll find me. If you're looking to start your podcast, the podcastlaunchagency.com. That's the agency. You can find out all the information there. Those are the two best places to find me. Yeah, and reach out. Say, hey, saw you on Kenneth's podcast. Love to chat. I'm open to chat. My knowledge is free, but if you want me to implement it for you, that's where you pay. So if you have a question, 1 or 2 questions, feel free to hit me up. I'll be more than happy to help you out. Make sure you tell me that you heard me on Digital E-commerce Podcast or that Kenneth sent you, because if Kenneth didn't send you, I don't want to talk to you. Simple as that. No, I'm kidding.
I will sure send that. Okay, and that wraps up another insightful episode of Digital E-commerce Podcast. I just want to extend a huge thank you to our special guest, Phil, the Podcast Mogul, right? I'm sure that you can search it on the Internet Explorer if you're that. So yeah, thank you for sharing expertise and valuable insight with us today. And it's truly a pleasure to have you in the show.
It was my pleasure being here, Kenneth. Thank you so much for the opportunity.